You're all set to start, John.
Thanks, Lauren. 7:01, March 23rd, the Board of Finance, Town of Madison is now in session. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. I need a motion to approve the minutes of February 16, 2022. Second. Motion made in second. Any amendments? Okay, you go on. None. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries. Hi, Cindy, how are you?
Hi.
The chairman, as most people know, or some people know, it was a sudden loss of a very close family member, one of our families, and that's why we moved this, started this meeting last week and moved it to this week. So we just want to wish that, even if private, we want to wish that family the best, and we miss them, and thoughts and prayers are with them. Any finance member comments or liaison reports? Fillmore?
Yes, I do have. Do you have? Okay. Alas, I have several. The fire pension is being proposed to be increased. I think we have heard about that, and it's going to be, I understand, being brought to the Board of Selectmen shortly, if it's not already, and then it'll be, I'm guessing, on our agenda next month. And it will basically increase their payout, their annuity from $5,000 to $10,000 a year, but it'll go up in steps. It's like 10 years to get there. So it's a gradual increase. It's the first time it's been changed since 20 years it is.
Okay, interject for 1 second.
Yeah.
I think, and I get it, we keep saying pension, but I think when you relay this message, as you have been doing to the public, it's not technically like a defined benefit.
Right.
So you just pretty much doubling it over time. It's going from 5,000 to 10,000. We're not talking about a percentage of their salary. I just think that's important.
That's a good point, John. It's more like an annuity that if they serve X number of years, X 20 years, whatever it is, they work for X number of years, then at age 65, they start getting now 5 and then soon be $10,000 a year. So that change will be coming to us in the next month or the month after at the latest, I'm guessing, assuming the Board of Selectmen pass it. Okay. The marijuana committee had a public hearing. Bruce Wilson did a very good job of presenting it, and it was a great party. Nobody came.
No.
As I recall, there was no public members of all this. Maybe they should all come down or something like that. Okay, finally, the library board met night before last, and they're in good financial shape. They're, as you know, they reduced their budget ask for the upcoming year, which we approved a little while ago. They reduced that by a substantial amount, and they're running so far this year about $100,000 in the black. So that's good.
You're talking fiscal 22?
Yes, the year that's going to be ending June 30th. And just as a side note, you may recall that when they built a new building, they put in geothermal heating and AC. And so far this winter, the heating season is about over. They've used 0 fossil fuel on the heating. That whole huge building has been heated completely by geothermal.
I do remember going through the tour. The tour was open. You showed that.
It was
it worked out.
Not just a lower amount, but 0. And I think we have to thank Woody Weiss for all that. That's great work. And Mr. Chairman, those are the 2
Thank you. Any questions for Fillmore? Thanks. Any other liaison reports?
I just have one that I remembered. The liaison to the American Rescue Plan Fund. committee, which,
What, I'm sorry?
American Rescue
Oh,
Fund,
yeah.
ARPA Fund. And we elected Bob Reinhardt as our chair, and, so we're just getting down to work right now. So I'll have more to come.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Okay. Is Peggy with us? I think Peggy said she wasn't going to be here tonight, right? She did text me saying we needed her, but I didn't reply, so we don't report tonight from the first selectman. Anybody from the public who'd like to comment? I'm looking at you, Lauren.
There is no one with their hand raised.
Second, third time. Okay. Public information session is closed. Presentation of the fiscal year audit. So the auditors could not be here tonight. They were supposed to be here last week. What I briefly talked to Stacy and didn't want to, I didn't want to bother her too much. But basically, what we decided was, if you have any questions about the audit, there were no material findings. I think the auditors, I did go through. I left at my office desk. But if there's any questions from the Board of Finance, email to Kristen or Stacy or myself, and we'll get that and we'll get an answer. If we need them to come back, they will come. But
Mr. Chairman, sorry to do this, but I did have a question for you. The, on the, I was looking forward to the video. In their audit, one of the pages they had, on that page, they gave the funding level of the 3 different pensions. And so if you go to look up, I think you have it online.
I actually have
Page 9 here.
it's in my office.
Yeah. So when you get home, you can put yourself to sleep or something. It gave the funding levels for the 3 different pensions, and they're substantially more than what we've been told earlier for different analysis. So I was going to ask them, more is better, but that kind of doesn't have what they've been told. So maybe they can pass that out.
Yeah, please.
Answer.
And I will look at it too. It could be as far as how well the market did for March 20.
Well,
I have all of this, but I think it's just a tiny issue of when they value it
Right.
and when this is printed. And I want to just verify what is the date that they use.
And I will look at it also.
and did they also, by chance, a couple of years ago, they increased the age longevity.
Mortality
Mortality
table.
Mortality tables. So maybe they're, and that dropped us.
That's reduced the
Yeah, but that reduced it, and so maybe they're still using the old. I doubt
And
it.
then we did the special and anyway, I'll.
Yeah, that's a
find out.
fair question.
Yeah.
And then, what I said before, and I'm saying it again, the question's not answered the way you feel comfortable, we will have them come. Okay?
And
This won't be tonight, though.
you'll email us all the.
Yep. I will find that out tomorrow.
Any other questions now for the audit? And if you think of something, send your Justin, or Fillmore, or Gene, just email them.
Repeating ID, followed by #.
Well, I think it's great news. So wow.
Yeah, I
It's a
think
testament
it's
to
a
the
good audit.
hard work
But I
that
think-
you all do.
I think Fillmore's point, you want to make sure those numbers are accurate. I mean, if they are, it's good news, but you still want to make sure they're accurate. But on the other, you look at the material findings, things like that, it's a good one. Hey, Gene.
Hey, Gene.
So, Milliman is, I'm assuming, is here, Warren? It wasn't rhetorical.
Yes, I'm moving Elena over right now.
Thank you. So we have the town pension and OPEB, and feel free, Fillmore, to jump in, and, of course, you have to raise your hand.
Hi,
Well-
good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm kind of new to this panelist setup, so I'm just trying to get my screen set up here. All right. Are you guys ready for me?
Right,
Yes.
I believe we have a couple of slides, and if possible, hold the questions to the end, but if you can't, you may interrupt you.
Sure. Yes, feel free to interrupt. So I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Yelena Pelletier. I'm one of your actuaries from Milliman. I'm sure you've met Becky Seelman. I work with Becky. I've been at Milliman for about 3 years now, and I've been working on your pension and retiree medical plans alongside Becky for that time. So I'm very familiar with your plans. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and giving you a quick overview of the pension valuation results. So if you just give me a moment to get that set up. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And actually, before we get into the valuation results, I'm just going to take a quick few moments of your time and share some resources that you might find helpful that we have on the Milliman website. I won't go over all of these, but I just want to point out that we have something called the Dear Actuary series, where we answer common questions that we get from our clients in, straightforward, non-actuarial talk. We have a public pension funding study that we update at least annually. So if anything here looks like something you might be interested in, feel free to check out the website or send me an email and we can get you signed up so that you get notifications when these publications are updated. All right, now on to the main event. So as you know, the town sponsors 3 pension plans for the police employees, for the volunteer fire employees, and for the rest of the town employees. Here on this page, I'm showing the results of the most recent valuation, which was performed as of July 1, 2021. At the top, we have the member status, the counts by member status, excuse me. And we have three types of members. The first are active employees. That's the first line. The second line are employees, former employees who have since terminated employment but haven't started collecting a pension. So some of them might just be due a return of their contributions. Some of them might just retire at a later date. And then finally, we have members in pay status. So these are members collecting an annuity either due to a regular retirement or a disability retirement, or perhaps it might be a beneficiary of a retiree that has passed away. So as you can see, the town plan has the highest membership, with the police and fire plans being significantly smaller. In the next section, first we're showing the asset values as of July 1, 2021. So as of July 1, 2021, the combined assets of the plans were about 44 million. And the big story this year is that you had great asset returns during the last fiscal year. The return was close to 30% for the year. I could only hear part of the previous discussion, and perhaps that was something that you were asking about the audit, what the funded status.
Wait, let me interrupt there for a second, because that was one of the things that was brought up. The audit showed, someone brought it to our attention that the numbers are actually better. One of the comments were that realized from March of 2020 until past December, the market did very well. So I guess the question was, what did the auditors, what were they basing their numbers on? If you can help, but we're still going to need to ask that, obviously.
Yes, so I believe their numbers are based on the asset values as of June 30th, 2021, and the liabilities as of that date.
So that's basically the same date that you have.
Yes, the difference here is that we've updated it for new census data. So we've reflected July 1, 2021 census data, whereas their report took the July 1, 2020 census data and rolled forward those liabilities. But essentially, yes, it's the same, very similar data that I have here. I'm also showing a funded ratio on this page a little further down. And that's going to be different from what they showed in the audit because this ratio is based on an actuarial value of assets, whereas the one in the audit is based on a market value of assets. And I'll talk about that next. So as we just mentioned, asset returns were great during the last fiscal year. But as you know, some years are good, some years are bad, and asset returns can be volatile. And we don't want that same volatility in your pension contribution. So we calculate a smooth asset value, which phases in any gains or losses over 5 years. So that's what I'm showing on this next line under the market value of assets is the smooth actuarial value of assets. And as you can see, we haven't recognized all those gains. So that value is a bit lower than the market value at about 40 million. So this is the number that we use for our funded ratio and to calculate the actuarially determined contribution. So next we're showing the plan's total accrued liability as of the valuation.
Wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, excuse me, thank you for that explanation, because I was having difficulty wrapping my arms around the two different sets of numbers, but I'm looking, on the town side, you're saying the liability, liability is a total of 33 million. And,
Correct.
and they are saying the town liability is 7 million. So, this is a question I'm gonna have to ask them.
Okay, you might be looking at a number that's the difference between the assets and the liability, like an unfunded liability.
Oh, that's, okay, it's a net, okay, that's a net.
Yeah. Yeah, the terminology gets a little confusing in the audit. Sometimes it's not clear. It's certain terms that had to be used in the audit that can be difficult to understand. But yeah, I think the net is the difference between the two. Yeah. And again, they're using market value. So that's why they come up with something more like 7 million, where I'm showing a 10 million number here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So here we have the liabilities, and then we compare the assets and the liabilities in two ways, like we just talked about. The ratio of the two is your funded ratio, and the difference between the actual value of assets and the liability is the unfunded accrued liability. And that unfunded equals about 16.5 million for the three plans combined. So next we get into the calculation of the actuarially determined contribution. And this is the July 1, 2021 valuation. So it produces the contribution for fiscal year ending 2023. And the contribution consists of three components. The first component is what we call the net normal cost. And this is the value of benefits accruing during this fiscal year. So the accrued liability represents liability for benefits that have already been accrued. Whereas, this year members are expected to work another year, earn another year of service, accrue additional benefits. So that's the net normal cost. That's offset by any employee contributions and also includes a load for expenses that are expected to be paid from the trust. So that's the net normal cost. The past service cost is a payment of the unfunded accrued liability. So as we just mentioned, there's 16.5 million unfunded liability. You pay that off over time. So think of it kind of like as a mortgage payment. You're taking out in the for the town plan, $10 million mortgage, and you're going to pay that off over a number of years. So that payment for the year comes out to about $700,000 for the town plan. And then finally, there's a interest adjustment, which just accounts for the fact that this contribution is for the following fiscal year. So we account for the fact that the contribution is going to be made a year later after the valuation date, so that there's a small interest adjustment. Then when we add up those amounts, the contribution is $1.5 million. And for the three plans combined, it's about $2.1 million. And just to compare that to the prior year, it's a bit lower. For the prior fiscal year, the contribution for the three plans combined was 2.25 million. And the main difference is, again, those great asset returns is what led to the decrease in the contribution. So that's all I was planning to go over for the pension plan. Are there any questions on that?
Good. Justin, Cindy?
Good. Good.
Everyone's good. Okay. Yep. It's good to share good news, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You had also asked me to talk about the OPEB plan.
No, it should be
I'll
good.
get it.
I'm sorry. Hey, we just wanted to know if you could send that presentation to us.
Oh, yes, definitely. After the meeting, I will send that to Lauren and she can distribute it. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Now I'm going to share a different file. Well, actually, let's begin before I share the file. Although let me just make sure I have it open. So I'm ready to share it. Hold on 1 second, sorry. Okay, I do have it. Okay, I do have it here. Okay, so I'm sorry. So before we start talking about that, I know Becky already talked to you about the idea of pre-funding your OPEB plan. Is that correct?
Well, pre-funded, but yeah, something like that.
Talked about it last year, I believe, right?
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick refresher since I know it's been some time. So as we just talked about on the pension side, you have a trust, you put money in that trust, and then all benefits are paid out of the trust. Whereas on the OPEB side, you basically pay benefits out of town funds on a pay-as-you-go basis. And what we're talking about here is moving your OPEB plan to function more like the pension plan, where we would calculate an actuarially determined contribution based on a very similar method that I just went over for the pension plan. You would make a contribution into the trust. Those funds would be invested. They would earn returns, investment earnings, and then any premiums or claims would be paid out of the trust. So that's what we're talking about. Big picture is moving from a pay-as-you-go system to a pre-funded OPEB plan. And why would you want to do this? What are the benefits of doing this? So first and foremost, you would be earning investment earnings. So benefits would be paid not just by town contributions, but also by those investment earnings. And a mature plan, for example, a mature pension plan, about 60% of the benefits are paid through investment earnings as opposed to town contributions. Another reason to do this is the idea of intergenerational taxpayer equity. Ideally, you want to have taxpayers paying for benefits for your active employees as opposed to your retired employees. And currently, when they're paying for retiree claims, they're paying for the retirees' benefits as opposed to the active benefit. And finally, it would be better for bond ratings or debt ratings to have a funded OPEB plan. I don't think that's an issue for Madison, your bond rating, but it's just something to be aware of. So I don't know if Becky showed you any numbers last time, but what we did is prepared a model to show you what would the contributions look like if you were to move to pre-funding the plan. Are there any questions so far?
No, that was helpful. Thank you.
No? Okay.
Very short, yes.
Okay, so what this model is showing is actually something very similar to what I showed on the pension side. So we have liabilities, we have assets, which right now there are no assets. So we're showing 0. We're showing the difference between those two. And then we're calculating those pieces of the actuarially determined contribution that I just went over, the net normal cost, the past service cost, the interest adjustment, which we then add up to get an actuarially determined contribution. And what we advise our clients to do when they start pre-funding their OPEB plan is to start off by continuing to pay the actual costs out of town funds and just put the difference in between the ADC and those retiree medical costs into the trust. Because when you first start, you just don't have enough funds in that trust to start paying claims from there immediately. So it takes some time to get to a point where the trust has enough assets in it to actually start paying benefits. So what we're showing here is the total ADC, which by the ADC is the actually determined contribution. Then we offset that by the claims, the pay-as-you-go claims that you would continue to pay out of the town funds for some time. And then the difference is what you would start to put into the trust. And what the model allows us to do is show a phase-in of that amount. So you would start putting in, 20%, 40%, et cetera. Any of these gray fields I can vary. So, if you say, oh, can you show us what would happen if we phased this in over 3 years or 10 years, I can vary these fields and show you what happens. Okay, so that's just kind of want you to understand what you're looking at. Now, another thing I wanted to mention is when we value your retiree medical benefits, since the plan is unfunded, we use a very low interest rate. We use an unfunded interest rate, which as of the latest valuation was 2.16%. If you were to establish a trust and fund these benefits, we could use a much higher interest rate because the assets backing these liabilities are now invested and expected to earn interest. So we could use an interest rate more like your pension interest rate, which is 6 3/4. And a higher interest rate means lower liabilities. So before I change that, if you want to just remember this number, right now the liability is about 29 million. If we were to use 6 3/4 as our discount rate, the liability drops significantly. So now the liability is 14.6 million. And then there's some other inputs in gray here. There's, how I talked about that past service cost being like a mortgage payment. So you have an option of, what terms you want for that mortgage payment. How quickly do you want to pay it off, for example? We started with 20 years. That's a good conservative number. It's 19 years for the pension plan. So that's close to that, but it's just a nice round number. And there's also another parameter, which we call the amortization growth rate, which is the rate that payment increases every year. And we use 3.5 for the pension. So we've left that the same here just to be consistent. So if we selected those as your funding policy, and let's say you started with nothing in that trust, these would be your contributions in year 1, year 2, et cetera. And just to repeat, that would be in addition to paying the benefits that you currently pay for claims. Did that make sense? I know that was a lot of information.
So this is including both retiree medical benefits, but also pension liability, pension payouts. Is that correct?
No, this is just for retiree medical. This is completely separate from the pension. I'm making comparisons to the pension just to understand the setup, but this is just for retiree medical benefits.
Other post-employment benefits.
Yes.
Just for the sake of discussion, if we wanted to set up a trust, and we can come up with any formula we wanted. We want to put 10% more than the pay as you go, or 15 or 20%. Really, just establishing the trust. I do agree with you. The money's in the trust, and obviously, not only can you use a different interest rate, but hopefully your investments do better. money, so eventually it would be hoping to pay for itself. The question is, you have to do the pay as you go and then put something else in, whatever that number we're comfortable with. And as last year, I think Fillmore, we put extra money in the pension, maybe that's something you can do. If we found some extra resources, we could put more money in the trust if we want to go that route. Mike, what's the average OPEB per year for the last 5 years annually?
What have been the claims that you're paying annually? I don't have that data. I have what we expect them to be, which is about 700,000, but we don't receive actual claims data.
Is that in there?
I'm looking,
That's good.
I'm looking at the budget, please. jump
Well,
in.
that's what I did, I brought everything else but that book. I'm looking at
I'm looking
it.
at page 13
There's a whole bunch
of the book, and it says, the health insurance line, 52,120.
Yep.
Is 2,031,031. We've got health insurance retirees, 205.
Yes,
So it's the 205
yes.
that we're talking about, because we're still paying the active people.
Still gonna pay the 205.
Still paying the health insurance to that.
Well, the health insurance, but that's not what this is just for the retired. So the 2 million is the 2 million,
That's for active people,
correct?
okay? And the 205 is what we're
Is
talking about.
this, yes.
So, and then,
There would be any life insurance, any other benefits that you offer?
well, we don't have life insurance for retirees.
Yeah, it's only, and that's what I'm looking. So see, this, I think, this is just our retiree medical costs versus that is what we budget and
Yeah.
should, you know, should it not work out for us, we're gonna come to you to help. Exactly.
On the other hand, it all goes into the same reserve fund. Right now, it's active and retiree both go in the same reserve fund. So it's, a total of 2,240,000 goes in, cover it all. And so, I guess my question, and I find this very helpful, I'm hoping you, you'll send this to us also, I hope. But, I guess the question is, if we were making a year from now or 11 months from now, when we're finalizing the upcoming budget, how much would we be putting in to start funding?
That's the question. The question is, I understand that the delta you're using, right? But you can come up with our own delta. Is it 10% more than our history? Is it 20%? Is it 25? Do we make it? It's a good question. To establish the trust and to start to fund it above and beyond the pay as you go, for lack of better terms. And that's just hit the nail on the head, Phil. That's what 11 months from now, what are we doing? What do we want to do? Do we want to start to trust? How much you want to put in and how much do you want to commit to put in? How much can you afford to put in, too, correct? There'll be some things happening.
So I think that starting in next fall, I think the board of selectmen will need to decide if they want to move this way. And if they do, then we also have to prove it. I don't think it initiates with us.
I don't think it initiates with us either. They would have to decide that they wanted to go forward, then we have to decide.
Then we could jump in with
Correct.
what's all
Has this
our.
come to them now?
I think at this beginning.
So if they decide they want it, and then, looking down the road, I guess if this were all, if we've done it 20 years ago or whatever, if we were all funded, then we wouldn't be having 200,000.
Limited pensions for you.
And, it would have been, whatever it would have been, it would have been earning money. These guys, so once we got over the big jump.
Let's go over there. That's the part that makes the most sense. You gotta get there. As she said, a mature pension plan, when you're starting out, it's a little different. And this has nothing to do with anything, and I think Madison's done an amazing job. But how many towns have started or have, out of the 169 in Connecticut that you know of, have started an OPEB trust fund?
About half of the towns have a trust fund. Some of those are not seriously funding it. You know, they've set up a trust fund, but they've only put in a very small amount. But I would say at least a third are seriously funding their OPEB plans, pre-funding. You know, we have some clients that have reached that 50 or 60% funded mark, you know, after, you know, it takes time, obviously, you know, perhaps they've been doing it for 10 years and they've reached that point where now they're transitioning to paying all the benefits out of the trust. So it takes some time and some annual discipline to continue to make the contributions, but if you do that, you can achieve a level of funding that allows you to do that.
Don, if I can just kind of support where Fillmore is with this, this is something we've talked about, you know, for a long time. And I do think that it does help us long-term to build this up. And with the funds that we have now in the undesignated fund, that I think this is a time that it would be smart for us to start funding this at a level that's appropriate to keep it, to offset some taxes in the future.
Thanks, Chief. Any other questions or thoughts?
I guess that,
Justin, that's.
you mentioned the pros. What would be some of the cons
get that
at least
fine?
to think about? What's that?
We just find.
I just find Fillmore for you. He jumped in out of turn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Should I answer that
So-
one or?
Yeah, the cons, yeah.
Justin, can you repeat your question?
I think I heard it. I think the question was, what are the cons of doing this? I
Yeah,
mentioned the
well,
pros.
Yeah, the pros. So what would be some of the cons? You know, are there scenarios where this might not make sense, I guess, but just to understand that. So yes, the cons.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main con is just having the cash available to make the contributions. You should also be aware of the fact that once you set up that trust, the money in the trust has to be used to pay benefits. You know, you can't later take it out and use it to, you know, I don't know, finance a school renovation or something. You know, once you set up the trust, it is used for these retiree medical benefits, but that doesn't mean that you have to continue adding funds to it or paying the actuarially determined contribution. You know, if at some point you decide you want to abandon this, you just pay benefits out of the trust until it runs out of money. But you do need to be aware of that. Once you set aside those funds, they are to be used to pay benefits.
Any other questions for you, Linda? You'll send us this presentation also. Thank you for your time. We do appreciate it.
Okay, I just want to point out that since this is a model, I can send you a printout with a certain set of inputs. So if you have something that you want me to model, you know, a different phase-in percent or something different, just let me know and I'll send you a different result. Okay.
Good, sorry, Fillmore had a question.
Yeah, let me jump in. If I'm just grabbing some numbers here, you know, the fact that, or the apparent fact that we're spending $200,000 a year on retirees. And the layout that you presented here that you'll send us has us basically starting from zero.
Mhm.
You also run a scenario where if we initially funded it with, let's say, $1 million.
Yep.
Just to,
Yes, I can do that. And that's usually what our clients do is you start off with some initial contribution to get it started. So I can put in $1 million here and send you that.
Sure, fine. Okay.
So that's what it looks like.
Any other questions? Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great night. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
We couldn't meet last week, so we do appreciate that.
No problem. All
Thank
right,
you.
take care, everyone.
All right. So now we have discussed and takes action to approve the line item transfer to request of Human Resource Department in amount of $1,920.72. Can someone make that motion, please?
Second?
Second, made by Katie, second by Fillmore, discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? That motion carries. We have discussed and take action to approve a special appropriation in the amount of $7,000 to fund the additional expenses for the downtown winter display. Motion, please. Motion made by Katie, second by Fillmore. And I sound right here. Discussion.
Well, much as I hate to spend $7,000, the downtown display is beautiful.
Fillmore, I agree with you.
I can agree more. I wish it would improve, but it really brings a lot of joy to a lot of people.
Especially, yeah, a lot of kids. Any other discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor,
Aye.
say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.
That motion
Thank
carries.
you.
All right. Discuss and take action to approve the request from the Public Works Department to move funds from the capital CIP program Highway Equipment Reserve from fiscal 23 to fiscal 22 for replacement of the fire marshal vehicle.
So moved.
We have a motion. Can I get a second? Second. Discussion.
Sam, what happened to it?
I think we just moved it
So
in
the
here. This is budget.
So the current vehicle that we acquired from Chief Drum, needs about $7,000 worth of work. The car itself, in good condition, is over 6,500. So we elected not to pursue fixing it.
Yeah.
If we need to have, vehicle replacement.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard, I know the issue. I do have a question though, but I guess the other, and Sam may have answered it at a previous meeting, but the other drive home vehicles that I'm familiar with are Ford Escapes. And I think, Sam, you're buying a Tahoe, right? Maybe just address that, because I guess that, at our last Board of Selectmen meeting, there was talk about moving the town over the long term to electric vehicles. And here we are talking about a Tahoe for basically one person to drive around. That seems a little bit contradictory to what, kind of the town's philosophy is. So I guess I just want to make sure, is there any other possibilities of finding the appropriate vehicle for the role?
So currently, I have an Explorer, which is adequate, but it's a little bit on the small side. We can make it work. So I was looking for an Explorer to replace, and as you know, there's not a lot, the car market out there's not a lot of vehicles around. I tried to get a hybrid, and they're about 26 weeks away. So this company that Chief Drum used to buy his police vehicles, which are all Tahoes, I started up there with the Ford, and he had the Tahoe for a couple $1,000s more, and it has more room. So we can go either way, but for a couple $1,000s, I think it's worth it to have the extra space.
I'm sorry, is this a used vehicle or a new vehicle?
No, it's brand new. It's a 2020, it's left over. And it's actually.
I'm not.
It's available now.
I don't.
Sorry, Justin.
I'm sorry. I don't doubt I don't argue or dispute the need for a vehicle. I guess it's $2,000 more today, but it's also even compared to an Explorer, it's just it's not, maybe it's peanuts, but you're talking gas. 10 years of use, you're talking gas and whatever else. It's just a more expensive vehicle. So I guess I just want to make sure if we have a program and we're maybe your department's more of one-offs as opposed to the police. But if we have kind of a buying program, I guess I would just want to make sure if we're deviating from it, that we're deviating for a good reason. I mean, you could go down to Hammonasset Ford and maybe pick up a new, Explorer from them.
So the problem is that's what we did with the car I have now. And the battery, we have to put a new battery in it every year. It's not built for emergency services. This vehicle has 2 batteries, has a bigger alternator. It has a heavy duty suspension. It's set up for emergency use. If
Okay.
you buy one off the lot, regular passenger car, it's not set up for it, and you end up having a lot of problems with it.
All right. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So that's thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Any other, I have one question I want to ask. Any other questions? Chief, I think the number wasn't there, it's 39,000 that we have the budget for. Is that all in?
No, there's $8,900 for this
So stuff on the back has to get included, right?
It's all regular. There should be another quote in there.
Yeah,
The 89,1850. And what the
48.
So I got a quote from MHQ for a little over 46,000 for a Ford, and that didn't include installed radios. So they're virtually like within dollars.
Yeah, I just want to get the number there. So you're moving that request from fiscal 23 to fiscal 22. Is the 39 and the 8918, correct?
Correct.
Any other discussion? Justin?
Yeah, I'll just acknowledge, Sam. I didn't realize when I heard, and I could still be wrong, but I thought this was a vehicle largely for the fire marshal. Fire marshal use, like, inspections and whatnot. I didn't think of like kind of emergency response. So I guess if that's the case, that would justify the beefier model. But I did not think of it in that context.
Yeah, so we do have to respond to structure fires, all our equipment, do the investigations, so on and so forth. And then on the emergency manager role, we go out and do patrols after storms and stuff like that. You have to have something smooth.
Right. And I'm just acknowledging I didn't appreciate that difference of use when I was thinking of, my thoughts of M&S at Ford.
All right, Justin. Okay, so the motion is on. Any other further discussion? So it's here to transfer basically 47,918.50 from CIP 23 to CIP 2022. In place of the vehicle and the stall and the Tahoe, right? 2020 Tahoe that we can get quickly.
We'll just deliver it tomorrow.
There's no further discussion. Seeing that all in favor, say aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed, abstention, that motion carries. Thanks, Chief. Discuss and take action to approve the round 4 of the ARP funding in the amount of $22,000. Motion made by Katie Stein. I need a second. Thank you, Fillmore. Fillmore, you're on top of your game today, I can tell you. So we had discussed the amount of $22,000. Is there any discussion?
Well, just to explain, this is for the emergency lights.
Yes, so it's to buy 4 light towers to use at election time, to light up intersections for. You might have in your quote to buy brand new ones. The brand new ones are $40,000. Buy 4. So these are $500. We're going to buy them used from United. I went up and looked at them yesterday. One of them does have a cracked housing on it that they're going to replace. And it comes with a 30-day warranty. 2016 units, and 2 of them have. There's one that's with 2,000 hours, one just a little over 3,000 hours, the other 2 have 5,000 hours.
What's the life expectancy?
Probably 10,000 or better. We probably won't even hit that if we ever going to use it. And they also do have plugs for 220 outlets and regular 110 volt outlets if needed to use it as a small generator. They are 5 kilowatt generators on them. They could be put at a place. It won't power up a building, but supplement some lighting circuits and stuff like that.
Thanks. Any other questions? questions, discussion?
And this is coming out of the ARC.
This is coming out of the, correct, the round 4 of the ARC fund, that's correct. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye, raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstention? That motion carries.
You guys look like you're really on top of this meeting.
Hey,
It's because you're not here, Gene.
take it easy over there, we're just trying to, pace ourselves. So, discuss and take action to appoint the auditors of Mahoney Sable for the town of Madison for fiscal 23, which is 2022, 2023. I need a motion to approve that. So moved made by Fillmore,
I'll
second.
second.
Second by Katie. CG, we're right there. I do have one comment, but any discussion? So my comment is this, that my recommendation is we appoint them for fiscal 23. After that, part of this is because of COVID and we have the referendum and a bunch of other things, but I think this needs to go out for an RFP. It's been a few years now, I think. After this, it should go out for an RFP. That was my comments on the discussion. Any other comments?
Got a question on that, how many years has it been?
6 years.
Six,
Yeah.
okay.
So I think in continuity, I did talk to Stacy before, continuity wise, which obviously she agrees, I think we all agree. Yeah. So, it's good. All
Yes.
I agree with you.
right. Any other comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Thanks. Opposed? Abstention? That motion carries. Review the financials. Don't know if you have any, you always have at least one comment.
Well, yeah, I was gonna comment that the tax receipts are running pretty good. And for this time of year, we're well over our budget. It's a good one, middle of March, usually it's 1 or 2. Later than that. So, good job.
Very
All
good
the
job.
news
Very nice.
tonight.
Thank you, Fillmore. Any other comments on the financials? Seeing none. Lauren, any citizen comments? Anybody there?
No one has their hand raised.
Once, twice, 3 times, public information session is closed. Fillmore.
I will be adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. We